Welcome to FFRF's Ask an Atheist. This week we're going to talk about secular parenting. We called it Raising Hell, how to be an atheist or free-thinking parent. And I have guests with me who are parents, who are secular parents, as I am, and I'd like to introduce them. Kristina Daleiden, who is our program assistant, and Lisa Treu, who is Director of First Impressions. So thank you for joining me on this show. And I'd like to say just a few things about my own experience. I was lucky enough to be raised without religion by parents who were supremely respectful of young minds and young consciences, and they would have felt that it was almost child abuse to indoctrinate us in religion or to even tell us how to think or what to do about religion. And so I think that was very lucky, and that was the way that Dan and I thought about raising our daughter, Sabrina. And in fact, my mother didn't like that word raising. She felt that children bring themselves up, and that you should wait until they are old enough to understand religious abstractions before you start inculcating them with ideas they can't really even absorb. So that was kind of their philosophy, that was our philosophy. I think it worked. And so we're going to get into some of the details about secular parenting, but first I'll start with you, Kristina. What was your experience growing up and your general secular parenting philosophy?
Certainly. I grew up in a family that was very lax Catholic. They had practiced previously, but by the time I was a child, we had stopped performing any real sacraments. It was holidays, Easter Bunny, Santa Claus, that sort of thing. And so there wasn't a whole lot of indoctrination, and I felt that really gave me the opportunity to explore my own choices and explore my own options and critical thinking skills, and I really wanted to bring that to my son's upbringing, and I think that it's paid off. He's a teenager now and a respectful, wonderful person, very widely interested, and I think that encouraging that has really helped him to feel comfortable asking questions and exploring things that are interesting to him without being boxed into some sort of mythical or fantastic world that religion really often brings.
So he's 13?
He's 13 now, yes.
So maybe in a minute we'll talk a little bit more about how his non-religion comes up with his friends. Mm-hmm. But now I'd like to go to Lisa Treu. And Lisa, you were raised with religion?
Yes, I actually went to Catholic school through 3rd grade. My sisters went through 6th grade, and I could not wait to get out of there. I felt that it was all basically punishments. Everything that was religion, I felt was something that I had to do because I did something wrong. And so to me, it was just an evil thing, and I just wanted not to be part of it. And when I had kids of my own, it was like definitely not going to be bringing religion into it. And my parents were very disappointed.
So that's caused some conflict?
Oh yes, definitely. But right now it's at the point where we just don't talk about it out of respect for each other. We just don't get into it so that we can have family get-togethers without any problems, but I would never do that to my kids, and I've never had any problems with school or other kids talking to them about, God or that they're going to go to hell or anything like that. And I've always listened to them, and if that would have come up, I probably would have been like, okay, well, you need to respect what they think, but they need to respect what you think as well, and to have them, educate themselves more so that they can speak from their heart.
So you were raised with religion, and from an early age you rejected it. But when your children were little, what did you tell them about religion, or how did it come up?
Basically it came up because some of their cousins were making their first communion, and they wanted to know what this was all about. And I just said that it was something that some people like to do because it makes them feel good about themselves, and it, shows respect for their beliefs. And I said, your father and I don't believe in that. And someday, if you know, you feel like you want to look into it further, we'll definitely help you with this, because they're, you know, at that time they were probably like 5 or 6. So we're just like, you know, if it gets to that and you want to find out more about it, we'll certainly help you do that, and you can make your own decisions. But right now, this is what your mother and father want.
And they never have asked to?
Nope, no interest whatsoever.
Well, my mother even took me, when I was in 4th grade, she took me around to some churches. She thought maybe I should know more about religion. And she even bought me a Bible. And boy, was that a disappointment. Maybe a little inoculation. So what about you with your son?
Well, I have been an atheist my whole life, and I've always been out my entire family. There really isn't a whole lot of question on my side of the family as far as religion or, you know, what we are to do with our thoughts and beliefs. We all respect each other. Fortunately, he's been exposed to a variety of folks who are religious, and he's been brought to Catholic churches and seen, you know, weddings and divorces and marriages. And I think that for my son, the question has never been very cloudy for him. You know, he has always approached me with, you know, his thoughts, and we explore what the options are as far as where he wants to bring his morals and his ethics. He's respectful and is very, like I said, very widely interested, and so he takes all of the opportunities to speak with his friends who are Jewish or Catholic or Buddhist. Fortunately, we're in Madison, so there's a wide variety of
So he hasn't
beliefs.
Experienced any kind of bullying or taunting or people telling him he's going to go to hell?
No, fortunately, and that's
And
a
your girls haven't
boon.
had that either?
No.
So, and well, I got a little of it, but mostly when I was growing up in the 60s, telling my age, in elementary school, there would mostly be envy. Kids would say, "You mean you don't have to go to Sunday school?" Well, not very many people, even religious people, go to Sunday school anymore, but it was considered typical then. So, so yeah, in other words, we've had pretty good experiences without religion. Now, we have gotten a number of questions coming in, and I thought that we would talk a little bit about dealing with the outside world. So one of the questions is, in a world where merely suggesting that God doesn't exist is considered an attack on Christians' beliefs, how should I teach my child to explain her beliefs or her family's beliefs to her friends? So either of you have any advice?
Would you like to take that first?
I would say that basically you want them to be thoughtful about it and to say, okay, well, this is my experience. This is what we believe in my home. And what you believe is what you're brought up with, and just respect each other, you know, instead of always jumping to the conclusion that yours is the wrong one. Just say there's a little bit of something for everybody in everything, and you have to open up your mind to that.
And what about you?
I agree. I think that's exactly the approach that I've taken as well, where, you know, he's free to explore and discuss these matters with his friends, and just to be respectful, basically. And, you know,
But Lisa, you had an experience where you actually had to just step back from your family and agree to disagree. So sometimes it can get heated.
Oh, yes, definitely. And there's been a couple of times where, you know, arguments happen, and you could see on I have twin daughters, and you could see it on their faces, like, Mom, what's going on? Why is everybody so mad? You know,
Yeah, a loving family, and suddenly
right,
there's this
and all of a sudden
acrimony.
you're arguing about, and they're just like, what's going on? And I would just take them aside and say, well, they believe this, we believe this. Someday you'll have your own beliefs, and, you know, if you feel strongly about them, yes, sometimes you're going to get into arguments.
Well, with
life.
my religious grandparents, we basically got the idea from my parents, you better humor them. They would take us to Sunday school. We would just button up and put up with it
Right.
for family harmony. But we always knew what my parents thought. And so getting back to you, Kristina, there's another question about explaining to others. Relatives have asked me how my child is going to learn morals if we don't take them to church and Sunday school. That's ludicrous. But what are some ideas for responding to their concern?
Well, as far as, the proof is in the pudding. And so when that question comes up, you can point to the fact that your child is respectful and caring and an individual who respects other individuals. That's always been my philosophy with my son. Every time, from the time he was little to now that he's a teenager, treat others as you would like to be treated. Give everyone the room to have their own freedom. Your freedom does not impinge on their beliefs, and their beliefs do not impinge on yours. And explore.
Anything else to add, Lisa?
I think that just teaching them to have an open mind about everything, whether it's religion, other cultures, all of that, I think it all fits together. And if you bring your children up right and keep their minds open and explain things to them, because they're just full of questions. And if you don't answer those questions, you got to answer them the best you can. And that, I think, gives them the feedback to go further in life and question things themselves and find the answers.
And do you think, though, that sometimes non-religious parents can be almost too broad-minded to the point where we're not making it clear what our views are to our children? Because I don't think religious people go around saying be open-minded to all the other religions. It's only, the free-thinking community. So do we also want to teach them critical thinking? In other words, inoculate them a little bit about religion. Be open-minded, but also we want them to approach religion with using reason. Mm-hmm. And so how do we inculcate that?
Well, and I think for me personally, it's a matter of being willing to say, I don't have the answer for that, and not being fearful of not having the answers, and being able to confront the hard questions and discuss based on our experience and our values, what we feel is correct. And we don't have to come up with answers, what happens to our mind when we die, that is not knowable currently, and we're open to more information. It's something where just the fundamental practice of being a good person, it comes through. And so giving that broad sense of belonging in the human community is something that really, I think, is fundamental for my parenting.
But what about equipping our children with the ability to know how to think, not just telling them what to think, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, there's so many resources out there that you can, and there's so many different ways that you can go about it. I'm sure there's some parents out there that will just say, oh, well, go look it up on the internet. Well, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say, well, if you're really interested, let's go to the library, let's find some books on it and see what they say, and then you can decide for yourself.
Which is teaching critical thinking. And actually, one of the questions was book recommendations on secular parenting or how to raise secular kids. And we do have some books for children that we sell that Dan Barker wrote at FFRF about how to think and how to be a good person and how to analyze religion. But I think, Kristina, you have some books that have helped you.
Yes, absolutely. And while I've really enjoyed Dan's Maybe Yes, Maybe No, unfortunately I didn't come across it when my son was small enough to be really interested in picture books. But I've relied very heavily on Parenting with Love and Logic, and I don't recall the name of the author right now. But basically it's a fundamental approach as far as, you ask the questions and you allow natural consequences to teach your children. And so if you want to, suggest that they wear a coat and they choose not to wear a coat, they will learn that the natural consequence is being cold. And I think that contributes to being able to reason through problems.
Learning the consequences of their actions.
Yes, exactly. And as he grows up, my hope is that he will be able to, employ a lot more of the rational approach to questioning and skepticism and, feel comfortable not knowing answers and learning them as he needs to.
And we do sell another book. It's a book of essays by different people. I'm forgetting the name, but at ffrf.org shop you can find that book.
Yes.
Have you run across any other resources for secular parenting?
Just the ones that we have here.
That we sell.
Same thing. I just really didn't look into it. I just went from my heart and just from my background, knowing the life that they would have if they were in the religious end of it. I just didn't want them to have to deal with that.
So what about, what did you do when your children were little about Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, that kind of thing?
That was great. We played along, we did it. And we did it until the girls started, questioning, because other kids at school were telling them there is no Santa Claus, and so what we did was we took them out to dinner, and we said, we want to talk to you about something important, because we felt like if we were at a restaurant, they'd be more open to it and it wouldn't be a big scene. And so then we told them, your mommy and daddy have been doing this the whole time, and that's just something fun that we've always done, and that's part of the holidays. And they understood that. They were disappointed, but I can't remember if it was Katie or Kari, but one of them said to me later on, well, we kind of knew that, Mom. We just didn't want to say anything because we knew then the gravy train was going to end,
or they want to hurt your feelings.
Right.
Well, what about you, Kristina?
My son was, I believe, preschool when he brought up, whether or not there was a Santa Claus. And prior to that, of course, with the little guys, we have the Christmas tree and, have all of the fun of the holiday season. And it's sort of an American tradition. I've always looked at it that way. I knew he would figure it out eventually. And so when he asked me on the car ride home from preschool, I just asked him, well, what made you think, what do you think? What made you question this? And he said, well, the wrapping paper is really... Santa has, why is he using our wrapping paper? And, but I asked him, well, do you think that, what would be the solution if there is someone who goes all around the world and drops presents down the chimney? And he said, I don't think that's possible.
Yeah. Well, Dan, who had been raised fundamentalist Christian, was uncomfortable, and I was a little uncomfortable. We taught Santa as pretend. And so, and even to this day, my daughter enjoys getting gifts from Santa. She knows it's from us. But we didn't actually say there was, it was sort of implied, but it was more like, this is a fun thing. Like the Tooth Fairy. I don't think our daughter ever believed in a Tooth Fairy. It was a game. But we also got questions about the Tooth Fairy. How did you handle that?
Oh, well, he was hip to it. By the time he started losing his teeth, he knew about Santa, and so he was already lobbying for a better rate on the bigger teeth.
We played along. We did the Tooth Fairy thing. But yeah, I'd say probably by the time they were 6 or 7, it was like, they
cottoned on.
It kind of all goes together. But I do want to say that Christmas every year, we tried to make our own traditions, and we always kind of pushed making gifts, and that it was about family. And one of the big things when they still believed in Santa Claus was my husband would take them for a walk in the snow on Christmas Eve, and they would look in the sky at the stars, and they would, imagine that Santa Claus was one of them. But the whole point of it was a tradition. They went for that walk, and they still do it now. And it's kind of like appreciating the winter solstice.
Right.
Which is such a beautiful night. And
the reason for the season is really natural.
Exactly.
The shortest night of the year. And of course, with Sabrina, by the time we had our daughter, and I was a co-founder of FFRF, and we were promoting the winter solstice greeting cards, and we never called it Christmas, we just called it the winter solstice, and we actually exchanged usually gifts on the solstice. What about you?
Well, it's family tradition. You know, we stick with the Christmas tree and the Santa Claus. Of course, it's all cartoons and Frosty the Snowman at this point. But my son was fortunate that when we moved down to Madison, his daycare center, they celebrated the solstice. And so they had, it was wonderful. And so we had big solstice parties and, you know, all the little guys running around and, you know, lighting the candles and enjoying cider and enjoying each other.
An enlightened day at preschool.
Very, very fortunate.
Which it's kind of nice because then anybody can celebrate the solstice, whether they might be Jewish or Hindu or Christian, because it is an actual event.
Yes, exactly.
So,
and I think that's very, very important. And we're, like I said, very fortunate to have that experience for him.
now, let's change the topic to something a little heavier, and that is death. We got several questions. How do you deal with the concept of death? The religious answer, so-and-so is in a better place, is easier and more comforting, but I also don't want to lie to my children. Well, now, I would never consider ever saying somebody's in a better place when they die. I think that in my case, death came naturally, pet. The first pet, the first death is usually, I think, how a lot of children learn about death. And I think they can see this creature is not going to rise again. And it's a very major landmark, I think, for anybody. But so that's how we handled it. What about you, Lisa?
Basically, again, it was a pet dying. Actually, we had our house burned down, and well, it didn't burn down to the ground, but anyway, we had 3 cats at the time, and we lost them. And what I just said was, this is the circle of life. This is the way it goes. And, you know, now they're part of Mother Nature. And we planted them in the garden, basically, and planted flowers around them. And now every year the girls will go over and say hi to the cats. And basically it's just hostas, you know? But that is the spot where they go to remember the cats. And all over my garden I have wreaths, circles, to remind them that that's how life is. And the one movie that I would suggest, if you know people are wanting to have a movie to kind of explain it to, is Disney's The Lion King. It shows that life goes in a
circle of life.
Yeah.
And of course, Elton John is a very ardent atheist. So
I think it's a
that's
great
a good
way
recommendation.
to and they're totally into that now. I mean, we talk about the circle of life a lot.
So what about you?
I was very similar. I was a little bit more deliberate. I raised my son with fish because I knew that they would not last very long. And so he went through, when he was, you know, a very small child, the fish would pass on and he would be with me, and he was probably just too small to really understand. But as he grew up and our fish would unfortunately pass and
die.
Yes,
not pass.
Exactly. Would unfortunately die, you know, I explained it exactly the same way. It's the circle of life. You know, we're all part of the natural world, and we celebrate what we have while we're here, and then we return to the earth and likewise have a plant in our garden, yes, for kitties and cats.
Yeah, and we had a pet bird, and there's a daffodil over that bird now. And we used to take our daughter for a walk in the cemetery, the city cemetery. Forest Hill is very close to where we live. And at a very early age, I realized that she was taking on death because when a kitten died that my parents had bought for her, I'm allergic, so they kept it at their house. She did this drawing of herself by a tombstone of the kitten. So that is a very real way to learn about death. But saying that you go on to a better place, I mean, I think that's the kind of thing that almost makes me cringe.
Well, I noticed that when my grandfather died, which was about the same time that the cats died, it was all like within a week, all this stuff happened. Their cousins, who were all religious, at the funeral very showy. It was all very much demonstrative and it was like an event. And my daughters were just like, Grandpa's dead. Why are they all so happy, and why are they doing all these things? And I just said, no, he's dead now. Yes, he is, and he's going to be going in the ground, and he's going to be gone. But we have memories, and that's what we celebrate. And the rest of them were all like, his hands are like rubber, stuff
it was
like
an
that.
open coffin?
Open coffin, yeah.
Yeah,
And I was just like, that's not
very-
what it's about.
Right,
Yeah.
and then your last memory is of this corpse instead
Yeah.
of the living person. I think a lot of free thinkers do memorial services, which you can do that even months after someone dies. You don't have to do it at the grave site when everyone's emotions are so raw, or it's hard to get there and travel. And so I really recommend memorial services as I think gentler and more respectful way of saying goodbye. What about you?
I couldn't agree more. I lost my sister about 15 years ago, and she had very specific requests for what she wanted of her memorial, and we were very, very lucky that she was willing to participate and plan in that, because it was unexpected. Right up until the end, nobody really wanted to accept it, and when she did finally pass, we were able to honor her with sending balloons aloft and notes, and contributing to the charities that were important to her. And I think that that's, again, something that we're just able to do because we're not locked into religious traditions. We're given
free thinkers.
Yes,
we're
not
do what we want.
Yes, we're not given specific things that we need to follow in order to obey or to avoid fear. And I think that's a big plus in being a free thinking parent.
Now we have another question that I think I'll direct to you, Kristina, which is, the golden rule seems to be the gold standard for teaching children to evaluate the morality of an action, but I'm reluctant to teach my children a religious rule. What do you think?
Oh, that's a good question. I can certainly see the apprehension in really even embracing something that is considered biblical. I don't see anything wrong with the golden rule. It worked out great when the little kids were hitting each other, and you say, well, do you like it when your friend hits you? And they look at themselves and realize that they don't enjoy that. I think there's certainly some utility there.
And it's not actually based on religion
Right.
or supernatural. And actually the golden rule far predates Christianity. And Hillel or Confucius, and actually they phrased it better. Do not unto others what you do not want done to you. Because what if you're a masochist? Whatever.
Speaking of parenting.
So what we might want to eventually, as our kids get older, we might want to tell them, hey, this is not unique to religion or Christianity.
Right.
We don't need the 10 Commandments to tell us not to kill people. Right. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
I just think it's a matter of respect, and that you should respect what other people think. And I've had my daughters have gotten picked on, and it had nothing to do with religion. And I always said, well, they probably are wanting something that you have, and that's how they're reaching out and trying to say, but some kids don't know how to do that, and they get a little physical, or they say something judgmental, and in the end, it's probably just that they think your red hair is beautiful.
Their red hair is beautiful. So their hair comes up.
Their hair came up a lot, and also my daughter Kari had some speech problems. And so kids made fun of the way she talked. And so those were things that, also you can deal with that as a parent just the same way you would deal with the religious arguments, is just that it's different. You're just different, and you are perfect the way you are, and they are perfect the way they are to their parents, and you just have to respect that.
Now, we also have a question here. It seems to me that raising kids to think that they are favored by an omnipotent being, that they are part of the chosen few can lead to elitism and perhaps more sinister strains like racism. Do you find that raising children without religion makes them more tolerant of others? I mean, I would definitely agree. I think there's just no question.
Oh, definitely.
And that early on, I mean, so my daughter was born in '89. I mean, she knew from an early age LGBTQ is not an issue. That you respect individuals. I think that there is a lot of racism that can come from religious teachings. Do you agree with that?
I do, and my son is of a generation that I have a lot of hope for.
Yes.
He has been brought up with the understanding that there's room in the world for everyone, and aside from certain deplorable and horrible, positions and actions that people take, we need not respect those. But as far as, when he is confronting difficult situations with other children, it's a matter of allowing them the rights that they have and the freedom to express themselves, and also standing up for what he believes and what he knows is right.
And Lisa, did you have anything to add? Do you think that children who are brought up without religion are more tolerant generally?
I think so, definitely. In fact, in my family, my daughters were both not very traditional, and when they were in high school, they experimented with going out with another girl, and right now my daughter is dating a wonderful man, and he is not, I don't know how to phrase it, but he's of color, as we say, and he's wonderful, and my kids have never, ever been, prejudiced against anything like that. They've always been open. It's like, it's okay if two girls want to be together, that's fine with me, because the thing I always told them is that everybody deserves to be loved, and that nobody should have that taken away from them.
Well, that reminds me of what Dan's mother, who was formerly fundamentalist, said when she finally became an atheist. She told Dan, "Now I don't have to hate anybody anymore."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Richard Dawkins wrote about that because he picked up on that. So, at least talking about the fundamentalist strains of Christianity. So that's a here on that question. But here's a devil's advocate question, and then we're going to take some questions from our Facebook fans and friends. And I forgot to say that you can send your questions to askanatheist@ffrf.org, or you can Skype, and we can see your face, live:/FFRF.org studio. So there's still time to send in some questions. But this is more of a devil's advocate question that relates to the last question. Aren't you just indoctrinating your children in atheism?
I don't know that you can consider encouraging critical thought and skepticism indoctrination at all. My son really enjoys exploring mythology currently, and I think that's something that grew out of his discussions with his friends who go to church or to mosque or to temple. And so he was interested in the Bible, the Torah, the Quran a little bit, and then he discovered Greek mythology and Norse mythology, and I think he's approached them all very similarly.
Does he like Neil Gaiman?
Yes. he's just...
Who is an atheist.
Yeah. So that's something that I think is just a happy accident, or maybe is the fruits of raising him the way that he's been raised, where he just explores all of these things, in the context of history is what I enforce. He must know what was going on in the world at the time that these things were important.
So I think it would be possible, I suppose, for fanatical atheists to indoctrinate their children in atheism, but I don't know anybody who does that, because part of being a free thinker, using reason in forming your opinion about religion, is using critical thinking. And if you're just rote saying that we're not going around gathering our children and making them recite there is no God. You know,
Right.
having meetings where we teach them you just have to be an atheist to belong to us. It's what about your thoughts there, Lisa?
Well, the thing that I always kind of stressed with the girls was that they should find out on their own, and that there's a lot of great stories that have come out of the Bible, but that's what they are. They're stories. And it's the same as the Hansel and Gretel, Cinderella, all the stories that you love. You know that stuff doesn't really happen.
And that reminds me of our bumper sticker, the Bible, a grim fairy tale. I don't know if I
Exactly.
like the tales of the Bible as well as I like, although there's a lot of fairy tales that are quite
Gory.
gory.
Yeah, exactly. And I just say, well, you got to take it with a grain of salt. You know, that's a story, and you enjoy that story, and there's things about it that scare you. There's things about it that you're questioning and you think that can't happen. Well, that's what you do. You read the story, and then you think about it, and you make your own decisions from there, how you're going to process that information.
And I also think that most of us atheist, agnostic parents, when we have in our families, we're just free from religion, as much as we can be, as much as you can be free from religion in our very religion-drenched society. It's just not part of the picture, and growing up free.
Yes.
So that's not really indoctrination.
No.
It's the opposite of indoctrination. So one final question before we see what's come in
Sure.
on your iPad there. Another question we already had, can my children really be moral without religion? And I guess that's the biggie. That's the bugaboo. That's what we always hear, that you can't be moral without religion. What have you told your children?
To basically respect other people and listen to what they have to say, but you should stand on your own and make your own decisions. Nobody should tell you what you should believe.
And what about you? The question of morality.
Sure. And I encourage my son to live without regret. You know, if you believe that an action is something that you will regret in the future, you need to think about it twice. You know, I respond to the people who ask whether atheists can be good without God with the question of what morals can you point to that the Christians are embodying, honestly, you know, with all of the terror and torture and everything in the world. I don't view Christians as having a special corner on that particular market.
Yes, and my mother always, and I think she embodied it, felt that the yardsticks of reason and kindness and compassion were what we need for morality. And so often religion teaches you that the doctrine is much more important than the person. And that's when we get into danger. Well, let's see what came. Have some questions come in?
I'd like to add something
sure.
real quickly. You know, as far as morality and religion goes, it's often a fear-based situation,
Yes.
and it's obedience, and those are characteristics that I don't wish to cultivate in my son, and was very, very deliberate in terms of thinking through how I would approach all of that. And I don't want children anywhere to be raised to behave out of fear. And I think that's something that, you know, is really a boon, again, for
Yes.
rethinking families.
Well, so, and Lisa, on that score, were you instructed that there was a hell?
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, that must have been rather terrifying when you were very little.
Oh, it was very terrifying, and, you know, I didn't want my kids to feel that way about anything. You know, and yeah, when another little kid comes up to you and you're a child and they say, well, you don't believe in God, you're going to hell, you know, the kid is just like, what's going on here? And
Well, we'd even been told that by Dan's grandson, you know, 5 years old. Taken to a fundamentalist church, and then he comes back to his loving grandparents and says that. He doesn't know what he's saying.
Right, exactly. And
But
that's why
that's
you
not
need
moral, is it? To teach
Yeah.
children that you can be tortured forever in this most grievous way just because someone doesn't believe the same religion as you?
Yeah.
How is that moral? So I guess that's a good comeback.
Yeah,
well, now what do we have coming in?
We do have some submissions. Let's see, we've got CD Dam from Twitter asking, if a child was raised completely shielded from religion, would they imagine a God on their own or be an atheist? And I think that's a fantastic question.
Well, Ernestine L. Rose, who was an early feminist freethinker from the 19th century, had an essay written, I think, 1860 in defense of atheism, in which she famously said, every child would be born an atheist unless they were otherwise inculcated. You have to be indoctrinated to understand a religion, but I think that doesn't necessarily mean that if you grew up without any society indoctrinating you, that some people wouldn't conjure up deities, because I mean, a lot of people explain religion as having evolved from this sense of agency, that we look at the sky and think it's angry, so that's Zeus, you know, a lightning god, Thor. So that's probably how religions evolved. In some forms of mental illness, people have hallucinations and delusions that might make them think there was a religion.
Yeah, that's, you know, it's like having an imaginary friend. You know, that's something that children come up with on their own, and you don't know what causes it, and usually it's something that they outgrow.
That they usually outgrow, exactly.
Exactly.
But many people do not outgrow religion.
Well, you can have friends, though, and so they have at least the experience of
reality.
friendship, exactly, and then out of that comes the imagination, you know, building on that. So imaginary friends, I think, are a little bit more real, realistic anyway.
Yeah.
Well, they're great for coping.
Yes.
Especially, you know, I've seen it a lot too with just single children. You know, they're lonely sometimes, and so they will come up with imaginary friend, and you know, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as, you know, eventually you work it out with them that is not real. But at some points in their life, that's what they need, and so then you let them do that until it becomes unhealthy.
One of Dan's first songs, when he came out of fundamentalist religion, that was a free thought song, he called Blood Brothers, and it's all about an imaginary friend he had, and then he plays What a Friend We Have in Jesus at the end. So he outgrew it.
Yeah.
So what else?
All right, we have Gregory Knight from Twitter asking, if secular children overhear their friends' religious parents ridicule non-religious people, how might this be addressed? Have you had that experience?
That
If your children overhear religious parents ridiculing atheists or agnostics, how do you address that? I imagine you may have had the opportunity.
only with a teacher in a school, which didn't, in elementary school, where they were singing this, I'm going to build up Zion's wall, the Lord is making us build up Zion's wall, over and over again. And that we had an unhappy conclusion at our elementary school. So, but not with, I don't think that Sabrina ever had any friends whose parents were very religious, just, or if they were, you know, Episcopalian, very tolerant. So we didn't really have a problem. I didn't remember have a problem growing up myself. What about you?
I think that the girls haven't really said anything to me. If that has happened to them, I don't know. It could have. I know that they had friends that they played with, and they would go over to their house and were corrected when they would say, "Oh my God!" And I said, "That's their household. You respect their rules. If they don't want that said in their house, then you don't say it. But it's fine in your own home."
I guess I would think the answer to that question is it would depend on whether you have to deal with those parents a lot. If you don't, then maybe you can just back off and not have a confrontation. But if they're getting in the face of your children, I guess your mama, the Papa Bear, protect your cub. You're may have to say something, but hopefully in as non-confrontational manner as possible.
Yeah, I think
I guess we'd have to know more about what that experience was.
Yeah, that's interesting though. Let's see. So we have FFRF co-president Dan Barker asking, do free thought families teach explicit morality to children or just let them observe and learn? Are there explicit moral codes and behaviors that are taught, or?
Gee, Dan should be here to answer that. I mean, I think we did both. When it would not be that we would sit down and give instruction, but as things would come up, or maybe watching the news, whatever, something would trigger it, and it would be a teachable moment. But I think an awful lot of it is by observation, modeling.
Yeah, I was going to say example.
Right.
Definitely.
In the natural course of family life, I think.
And, you know, that's come up a lot with my daughters because of the fact that the rest of the family is all very religious. So, you know, they ask me, you know, why, or they did when they're growing up. They're both 20 now, and they pretty much have figured things out for themselves, and I'm very proud of both of them. But they would ask me, you know, why do they do this in church? Why do they have to go to church? And they would, you know, I would say that's what they believe, and you have to respect that, but that's not how your daddy and I feel. And someday, if you feel like that seems like the path you want to choose, you can educate yourself, you can find out more about it, and you can do that as an adult.
You can make up your mind for yourself when you're old enough. Yeah. Anything else in there?
Oh, we've got a lot of comments coming in. So let's see. Nathan Vang via email asks, when is the proper time to talk to my kids about my non-beliefs or religion, or should I just wait until they approach me? Did you approach your children? I mean, obviously you and Dan have been very active in the atheist community.
Yeah, I mean, Sabrina would come to work with us, so she was in an environment where we were doing our work, but she was very tiny, so I think that it was let nature take its course as things would come up. What about you?
Well, I agree. I think it's coming back to what we had discussed earlier, it's not so much a framework, it's just you are free from religion. It's not something that, you know,
dominates our lives.
Exactly, that we're concerned with, but as, you know, questions come up and, you know,
like
quandaries.
What happens when I die? And then you would take it from there. What is that?
Yeah, I would say that the best thing to do is to foster their curiosity and do question and answer with them. And don't say, you know, well, ask your father. You know, it's basically, no, let's sit down and talk about this. What exactly is bothering you? And you know, and then I can explain from my point of view, well, this is how it was when I grew up, and I didn't like it. And I developed my own ideals and my own beliefs out of just educating myself.
I think that as parents, we do have a responsibility to protect our children from harmful things. And I would think that religion would be right there as something that creates a great deal of harm, this notion of hell, of supernatural worlds that we don't have evidence for. You know, that we do our children a great disfavor if we indoctrinate them in these ideas for which there's no good evidence. So, I mean, I think that really proactively, it's very important for non-religious parents to proudly carry the free thought banner, but it isn't necessarily that you're discussing religion all the time with your kids. It's that you're protecting them from some of these ideas that I think, quite frankly, could create a lot of neuroses, such as the idea of a hell or a God seeing every single thing you do, in like Santa making a list of what's good or bad. These are, I think, very harmful notions.
I agree. And well, we have a wonderful comment from Cassie via Facebook. She just wanted to note that it is so refreshing to hear advice from other atheist parents. We live in Kansas, and there are very few atheists or even open-minded people here. It can be a challenge trying to raise my children to be free thinkers while we are surrounded by religion. Even finding a non-religious preschool is impossible in our city. So thank you for sharing advice and everything the FFRF does.
Well, we can also say, is that what was Tracy, did you say?
Cassie.
Cassie. That Cassie, if you run into religion in the public school, if it's a private daycare, we might not be able to do anything about it, but in that 4-year kindergarten or in your public schools, we really would like to go to bat for you if you are getting if your children are being indoctrinated. There's really, the law is on our side against religion in our public schools, and we can really do a lot of watchdogging and at least keep the schools from indoctrinating your children.
Wonderful.
But we feel for you.
Yes.
Definitely.
It's an
Here
honor.
in liberal Madison. Anything else there?
Well, I think we are running out of time, but we do have, let's see.
Maybe a final question?
A final question?
Do you have a final question?
Well,
I think that's actually was a very good note to end this on, that we know that in many parts of the country, people don't have the luxury of being in really a very liberal, progressive atmosphere as we have in Madison, Wisconsin, and you're going to run into a lot of religion, and we'll do our best to help you if you run into it in the public school sphere, and hope that you can avoid it at family gatherings.
Well, and the non-religious is the fastest growing sector of the population.
That's right. So, and 30% of young people, so your children are not alone. And you are not alone.
That's right.
So, well, thank you, Kristina Daleiden and Lisa Treu, for sharing your secular parenting experiences. And we hope that you will join us next week. We are going to be talking about the Johnson Amendment, and that means what is so radically wrong with politicking from the pulpit and what it could mean for our country. So this is a live program. Join us Wednesdays at noon, and we'll see you on Facebook Live next week.